Welcome to Health Systems CIO's interview with Ashley Gelisse, Business Information Security Officer with Michigan Medicine. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Ashley, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Looking forward to having a fun chat. So, Ashley, you want to start off by telling me a little bit about your organization and your role?
Yeah, so I work for Michigan Medicine. Michigan Medicine is an academic medical center in the state of Michigan. That means we have three distinct mission areas. We have a research mission, a clinical mission, and an academic mission. So a lot of different sort of business needs and a lot of different groups that we work with. We also have three different locations within the state. There's the main academic medical center in Ann Arbor, and then we've also got two partner organizations in the state. One is in Lansing, Michigan, the other's outside of Grand Rapids, and there's many other community partnerships beyond that. We're part of campus, but our security shop is separate from what you would traditionally think of as the ivy covered halls at U of M. So
Mm-hmm.
we partner with them heavily though.
All
So
right,
that's
go ahead.
yeah, yeah, Mishmed in a nutshell.
All right, and your role, which I find very interesting. Um, I think it's more prevalent than I think it is, but I don't see a lot of those titles. I find it very interesting. So tell me a little bit about your role as Business Information Security Officer, and then how it fits in with the overall cybersecurity team.
Yeah, for sure. So as BSO for short, I think it is a newer sort of emerging role in this field. But my role really is to be a liaison with the business side of the organization. Um, at Michigan Medicine, we've got CISOs who are dedicated, one to the academic medical center, another to our regional partners. And then, my boss is kind of the CISO that oversees the dedicated CISOs and myself. So we've got a really nice mix of dedicated, cybersecurity expertise and professionals. What we found we were missing was that voice of the business. Um, as I indicated, with three sites, with three distinct mission areas, what we were doing in terms of assuring, say, the clinical practice, it wasn't always tuned adequately for the research practice. Researchers are often doing new and novel things. They're doing it in novel ways. They're sometimes, well, often doing it, with grant research, which has tight and specific timelines. And our assurance practices weren't always nimble enough to meet those needs. Now, I can't say we're fully there yet, but it's something that we're really leaning into to better understand um, what do they need to communicate, why we're doing the things that we're doing. Um, and it helps us produce better outcomes. So my role is really kind of a liaison between the security team and the different business groups. Because security is a team sport. We can't do it alone. There's no process that's going to solve it all. So building those relationships, particularly in a large and federated environment like ours, is critical.
And so is research the main entity that required a different touch, so to speak, or are there other entities besides research that we're talking about here?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it was certainly more than research. That's heavy in my mind today, just because of some, things I was doing before I walked into this
Hmm.
meeting. But the academic mission has their own needs, and even within the clinical environment, certainly not a heterogeneous group. Within Michigan Medicine, we've got about 60% of our clinical environment, which is operating under a shared IT umbrella. So 60% of the environment is kind of standardized. We've
Hmm.
got, I'll say easier workflows, easier approaches there. But then we've got 40%, which has their own IT practices for really good reasons. Radiology is extremely complex and the tools they use are extremely complex. So they've got, specialists there to run the IT. From what I've seen, that's the case in many hospital environments. You've kind of got these specialist groups that have their own IT shops. We're responsible for securing the 40% that's not integrated and the 60% that is. So part of my role was kind of working with those different groups, particularly in the group, the 40% of IT that's not aligned and integrated, so that we can, make sure that they're plugged into our assurance processes as appropriate and we don't have blind spots or minimize the blind spots.
So is a better way for me to think about this that as opposed to just saying it's just research or it's just revenue cycle and thinking that word business really creates the bucket we're talking about. It sounds like it might be better to think of this bucket we're talking about that you're dealing with as having a different needs from an operational point of view that require a different cybersecurity touch.
That's fair. I think that's fair. It's not necessarily a one size fits all sort of maybe what might be more, strictly seen in a business environment
Yeah.
that's, a little bit more heterogeneous. Um, very different needs and use cases, different risks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so part of my role is to help understand those and translate back to the technical teams. Um, it's really difficult to ask someone. I mean, I think a lot of us in this field have seen this, particularly if you're working in vulnerability analysis and you've got a compliance framework that you're managing to. I think it's really difficult to then, bring your head up and say, is this, new use case that I might see, in research or in radiology, how flexible can I be there? I don't think it's fair to ask our practitioners who are on the ground to make that calculation on a case by case basis. I think we need to do it more broadly, and in a somewhat standardized way so that we can support our teams if we do need, to tolerate something or if we need to approach assurance in a different manner across the enterprise.
I mean, how would you describe the things that are going to fall in your lap versus the traditional cybersecurity group? I would imagine there's some gray areas where, hey, could go either way. I could take this one, you could take this one. Some may be very clear cut, like these folks, as you mentioned, research was, I think, was a great example. They have special needs, they have speed issues, sharing issues, all these kind of things where if you applied the traditional framework to them, they would not be able to do their work successfully. It makes a lot of sense, and I never thought about it this way, that by group, you can't treat everyone the same from a cybersecurity point of view. If you try, you'll have some very unhappy people. But as you said, if we're going to pull someone out of the traditional framework that's going for 60%, we have to really understand what they're doing and what their needs are. And it's all about risk, right? It's all about risk. So we're going to have a higher risk tolerance over here to make them happy. But it should be as absolutely low as it has to be to make that. And that's your job is let's figure this out and let's get to a place where everyone signs off and everyone's happy and we've done the best we can. Does that make sense?
I think that's a really, really great synopsis, and we try to triangulate a lot of different pieces of information to make that judgment. We have to look first at what are the strategic objectives of the institution. So the clinical enterprise has a very clear strategic plan. We
Right.
within cybersecurity have our own strategic plan. Research has strategic objectives, right? So first you got to look at it and say, okay, if we're being asked to maybe tolerate something or to change a process, which, takes time and effort, are we doing it in furtherance of one of the key strategic objectives of the institution? Or is this just, um, a loud partner type of issue? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You gotta make sure
Right.
you're calibrating that appropriately.
Right.
So you have to triangulate that. And then to your point about risk, we work a lot with our threat intelligence team and we say, hey, where are we seeing active threats? What are the threats doing in this space? Is this a high risk space or not? And if it's not, it gives us a little bit of comfort to say, okay, we've got some room to move here. How do we do this? So it's a team sport. I can't say it enough. And we're fortunate to have, a lot of those resources with a threat intelligence team and, clear strategic outcomes from our partners that we can align to.
Yeah. There's the group that raises money. I forget what the donations, philanthropy, fundraising. What are they called? Is it,
Yeah, they're called
well,
oh my
is it
gosh.
something else? Is there a different word for it? What,
It is. It's like
foundation or some
development or something. I know
whatever it
it's
is?
escaping me.
The organization in health systems that try and raise money,
Hmm.
they're highly targeted, from what I understand, from bad cyber actors. The help desk, more and more, highly targeted. Um, research, definitely by state actors, right? Highly,
Hmm.
especially, around vaccines and things, highly targeted. So those seem like things that may get pulled at and over to you for deeper analysis, and it's almost like a custom fit, right? It's like you go into a store for clothing and you go, hey, you're a little different than the average person. You got to go get some custom clothes,
That's a good analogy. Yeah, that's right. You
right?
need a tailor. Yes,
Yeah, we don't have anything off the rack for you, so
that's a
go over
good way.
there. So,
That's a good analogy. The
you're
BSO is the tailor.
yeah, you're there for custom cyber fittings.
It's true. Revenue cycle, I think, is another good
Uh-huh.
example.
Right.
We all have a rev cycle team, and those groups are increasingly targeted. They work with many different partners. They have
Mhm.
highly sensitive information, and just trying to divert payments is a risk.
Yeah.
And that particular team works at such high volume.
Mhm.
That's another. So for them, and we had this come up. We had an issue where, we were seeing some issues going on, some threats that we were attuned to, and we reached out to RevCycle. And we said, hey, we've got these threats. We've got to increase some security practices without getting into all the details.
Mhm.
And they said, yeah, that's all well and good, but we've got financial margin targets that require a certain level of processing by our
Mhm.
team. If
Mhm.
so cash is on the line here, and if we're not processing, I can't remember what it was, some astonishing number of transactions a day,
Mhm.
the bottom line of Michigan Medicine is impacted.
Mhm.
So what are you going to do about that, security? and
Right.
we and we said, oh, so
Yeah.
let's go back to the drawing board. And we were able to come up with a solution for them. It was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. But it required us to think differently. It was not a compliance solution.
Yeah, because they're basically saying you can't slow me down. Like you can't put in a process or something to lower the risk level based on what you're seeing in terms of threats that will slow me down. And here's why. And then you say, oh, okay, let's discuss. Let's figure this out. Right? I mean, that's what it is. That's the dynamics.
That's exactly the dynamics. And sometimes we have a clean answer for that. Sometimes we don't. But in this case, we were able to say, hey, I think we can get this new tool for your team. And for these, again, without getting into the details of the issue, um, it's, flip it on and it'll give us a good measure of risk reduction.
Hmm.
Won't take care of everything, but
Right.
you hardly ever can. So we were able to go hand in glove, security team and revenue cycle team, and say, how do we find some funding for this tool?
Mm.
And we were able to secure that and get it implemented.
Yes, it's fascinating. I mean, this is fascinating to me. And I really think that this is where the secret sauce is. It's the conversations. It's right. It's the flexibility on everyone's side. You know that above a certain risk level, it can't be, right? I mean, it can't be. So, and they know that below us, like you slow me down below this level, it can't be. So, right? It's like a union negotiating with ownership, right? It's like any negotiation. It's we have our absolute cannot move off this, and they may have it there, and where are we going to work it out, right?
I think that's a good way to describe it. I mean, it is really about conversations and relationships more
Yeah.
than CVEs or anything else.
Mhm.
I think, and to your point, exactly, both parties are fully aware of the importance that the other provides. So, another example came up recently. We're working with our human subjects research team. There's a whole process that occurs before you can do human subjects research. And we're trying to partner more with them to make sure that our team is involved earlier in their
Makes sense.
process
Right.
so that nobody's, so we're reducing the risk of folks getting caught unawares, if there's a security issue, like close to go live. We know we are clear-eyed about the fact that the University of Michigan must do human subjects research.
Mhm.
It's a critical component of the work that we do as a leading research organization. We
Mhm.
have no interest in slowing that down.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, the other side of the coin is that they have no interest in jeopardizing um, their research work. They have no interest in um, exposing any of this work early, getting it out of their hands and undermining it.
Mm.
So the good part of it is there's plenty of really interesting challenges, but very few cases where both parties can't see each other and understand the value, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So you just have to find the middle together. It's more art than science.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It sounds like a fascinating job. Um, do you find that in some cases they may not be, and you see this less and less more with the publicity of incidents, but do you find you have to do some educating perhaps to make them understand what you're talking about when you talk about risk and ransomware events and places being shut down, and maybe they don't understand why you need to lower the risk that they're potentially creating if they don't adjust some of their workflows, or you don't add some tools on, or does everyone pretty much get it, that how bad it can get?
I think people get it. I
Hmm.
think that I really do. I think people get it. I think where we need to lean in a little bit sometimes is we'll have two issues. One, people get it, and particularly around here, they are 10 kinds of smart.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
And they actually have quite a good basis and understanding of the issue. Um, and therefore, sometimes they may make assumptions about how secure a thing is. And just because we have different information, we may say, oh, not really, or
Yeah.
maybe 6 months ago, but this new thing happened. And, so we've got to align on that. So that's one issue sometimes that can occur. It's just, hey, we've got expertise, we've got different expertise,
Hmm.
not to diminish your own, but let's kind of at least compare notes here, right?
Right.
And then the other issue is just one of speed. I think people understand the risk. They read it in the paper all the time. It's not really an. I don't get the feel that it's a hidden risk to most folks. Um, and they've got a grant deadline staring them in the face, or
Hmm.
they've got students coming in 2 weeks, and that timeline is the motivating factor. So the big question is, can you do this and still let me meet my business needs?
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it even starts with, can we meet? Can we get on the phone? Well, who are you? Well,
Exactly.
right? Well, who are
So
you?
yes, a
Right?
hundred
It's like,
percent.
and they're like, I don't see doctor in front of your name, so, why are you calling me?
That's so
I mean,
true.
like you said, they're doing 10 kinds of smart. They're doing crazy kind of amazing stuff. And you're like, hey, can I have a minute? You know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like there with my clipboard, like, hello, you know. They're like, I have never seen you on any
Yeah.
documentation. You've been in no meetings that I've been in, especially here, because it's a really intentionally federated environment. Because we
Right.
want, you know what I mean? Because I
Right.
think as U of M has grown over time, we've tried to give our different areas of practice that level of independence so that they
Hmm.
can really innovate. Um, so like one of my favorite sayings, my boss always says, there's no Pope of U of M. You know what I mean? So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but that's why I think I do think the role of BSO is important because it helps you develop those relationships earlier. So you're less likely in the event of a concern or an event, you're not scrambling to figure out who your person is or who your people are. You've got relationships in place already and you've got some trust there and some familiarity there so that when if ever heaven forbid something goes sideways, you're less likely to have to do that awkward dance, in the beginning.
So you working to, I mean, do you even trying to get ahead of issues and just meet people? So, for example, there's nothing going on, you're good. I just want to meet you, let you know who I am, what I do. Because as you said, things might change on the threat landscape side where you now have to go have a conversation, but at least maybe you've had coffee before.
That is what you just said is a critical component of what we do. My team has a group of folks that specialize in organizational change management. So, a big priority for us after I became BSO was to get that organizational change management muscle memory stood up across the organization. So we now have mission aligned meetings that occur either monthly or quarterly with mission leaders. And it's exactly what you said. We meet, we kind of compare notes. Hey, this is what we've got coming up. Any issues, any questions, any blind spots for us? What's going on with you?
Hmm.
What are you focused on? What are you struggling with? And we just have a conversation. We bring, you know what I mean? We bring
Hmm.
our portfolio. We talk a little bit about what we're seeing on the threat landscape or on, in terms of regulatory changes. And sometimes they say, go talk about that issue to these three other groups.
Mm.
And we have a list of personas. As we learn about these groups, we add them to a list of personas and it's tiered so that we can tune the message from, executive to like mid-level manager to technical teams. So we can speak the right language depending on who the audience is.
Hmm.
So we build that out consistently, and I talk about it like a marble run. Every time we have an issue, we look at our persona matrix and we say, what run of the marble run does this particular issue need to go in? Is it really
Hmm.
at the executive level or is it more at the technical level? Put it there. It fans out to these groups. So we're able to create content, you create once, use many sort of way and just kind of cascade it out through the organization. And like I said, the mission aligned conversations really open the door for us to get some level of trust built there before there's an, before there's an incident or before there's an emergency. And it's been very helpful for us.
That's great. And I assume that helps. You mentioned the idea of being brought in at the beginning of an initiative or a new the business, the users, the operators, the clinicians want to do something new. They want a new application. They want to start a new project. Uh, and this happens in cyber all the time when you're brought in towards the end, and you're like, no, 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 right? Or there's all sorts of problems here. Much better and that's education. Bring cyber in at the beginning. It's going to be much smoother. We'll get you on the right path from the beginning. That all that relationship building helps with that too, right?
It does. And it also helps us understand what's important for them to hear.
Hmm.
If we can de-jargon that message, if we can give them a place to go to find the information, it takes a lot of noise out. Like, for instance, back to the example of the human subjects research. Our process, without getting into all the details, was relying on procurement.
Hmm.
Procurement was one of our key triggers, and we have all kinds of workflow and detail in there, right? Here's what you do, here's what needs to be in the contract, etc. We found as we were working with this human subjects research process, they're
Hmm.
often not buying anything, but they are signing contracts, right?
Wow.
Because they're not buying anything, but they're exchanging data. So there's a gap. And the boilerplate that we already had for procurement doesn't really fit when you're not buying anything,
That's
right?
awesome. This is so great.
So they said, what, okay, what do you want us to put in our contracts then? We'll do it. And we said, oh, okay, that's a ring I can grab, you know?
Hmm.
So we went back and we said, what's going to give us some comfort that as we're exchanging this data with whomever our partner is, a pharmaceutical company or, one of the three-letter agencies in the federal government, what's going to give us comfort that this data is safe and secure?
Hmm.
And we've provided that to them, and it just took noise out of the room because
Hmm.
it didn't force it through a process that didn't, wasn't really tuned. It wasn't tailored, as you
Yeah.
said earlier.
Yeah. I love that, and I'm laughing because I'm like a workflow guy, like a process guy. So when you talk about trigger, I'm like, you're speaking my language, and I know exactly what you mean about the concept of a trigger that didn't hit anything. It's the wrong trigger. It doesn't work. And then you got a workflow malfunction. I think of it like when I was little, you used to get dominoes, like all these dominoes, and I'd put them up and set them up, and then you could knock them over, it would knock the rest of them over, right? You make a big pattern, and this is like if you have a gap, the domino falls, doesn't hit the next one, and nobody knows. And crickets, nothing happens, and nobody knows nothing
Exactly.
happened until there's a
Well,
problem.
until there's a problem, or until, heaven forbid, you've signed all your contracts, you've launched your study, and you go to connect to the network, and we say, "Oh, what's this?"
Yep.
And all of a sudden, we've got all this unpacking to do.
Yes. Yes.
Whereas if we would have been involved in the beginning, we probably could have just avoided so much of that noise.
And that unpacking, I've spoken to others about that dynamic, and what they always say is you got to be nice. You got to be nice. You don't get to go, how dare you? You don't get to slap knuckles. You say, excuse me, we just noticed something on the network. Maybe, and you fix it and you remediate and you go, maybe next time. And then you look at process and you say, how'd this get through? Where did the domino miss? And it's so interesting that you said, it was procurement, right? And it wasn't going through procurement because they weren't buying anything. We didn't realize that. But then when the contract comes, then we have the wrong boilerplate because nothing was bought. It's just fascinating to me that, but that's how you have to do it. You have to find and fix workflow, right? So all those
Yes.
things sometimes are gifts. We call near misses, they call them in many other areas. A near miss properly handled is a priceless gift.
Oh, I love
Right?
that.
That's good, right?
Yes, I love that. Yes.
That's good. That's good. That's good. We want near misses. We don't want disasters. I always say this, right? Like you don't want the ship to blow up, but a near miss is a gift because it alerted you to something in a non-destructive way. So,
A
but you got
hundred
to make
percent.
use of it. So the where you really go down or don't go anywhere is you're given that gift and nobody does anything with it. And
Oh,
right? It's just well,
yeah. You undermine your partnership. I
right.
mean, and it, the partnership is something that just needs to be built over months and years. And sometimes, I mean, we all know this, right? Sometimes you have to say no, sometimes you got to
Yeah.
turn something off, and it's nasty. But if your relationships are such that folks know that you never do that lightly, you never do it flippantly, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really the goal. Um, how, and I love that language you used about the near misses being gifts. Every little rock you turn over when you find a roly poly, it really is. You got to figure out, okay, which ones am I going to pick up, and which ones am I going to, not. You can't chase them all. Um, but man, visibility is the key. It's the first step, right, in our job.
Right.
Visibility, you got to align on the insights, and then you got to measure the remediation. That's kind of those three buckets, and they just cycle through. So if you don't have the visibility, you can't do anything else.
Yeah. I want to. The one real challenge in this kind of work, the one that would be, I think, the most difficult for me, is when you go in with the proper. mindset, the proper approach to the partner on the other side, and you're met with zero flexibility. And I don't know if that happens to you sometimes, but that to me is the ultimate challenge, right? If you have two sides that say, listen, we all have the same objective, a healthy organization. They employ me for a reason. There's issues I'm here to help manage. I know I respect your work. There's issues you have to manage. Let's discuss. I mean, I guess to me the most difficult thing would be being met by a completely inflexible wall on the other side, and that's maybe when you go to your higher ups and you say, hey, I need a little help here, right? Because I'm not getting anywhere. Your
No,
thoughts? Yeah.
you're exactly right. You know, we're a high reliability organization in healthcare. So we've got, these high reliability tools that we use. And one is just the chain of command. It's very explicit. You use that in a clinical environment. So if you're a nurse and you see a doctor that hasn't washed their hands or, isn't following the correct procedure, you're expected under our high
Mm-hmm.
reliability standards to escalate that concern. If you bring it
Mm-hmm.
up with them directly and then you're rebuffed, you're
Mm-hmm.
expected to escalate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not the world we want to live in because we know in cybersecurity, we do carry the hammer of regulation, right?
Right. Right.
But you never want to lead with that. But
No.
you have to escalate if there's a true risk and you've tried to resolve it and you
Right.
can't. Um, on our best days, we try to say, all right, maybe this person isn't engaging because they had a bad experience in the past.
Right.
On our best days, we try to say, all right, what other pressures do they have that, may be weighing more on their mind? Let's try to speak to those or be aware of those. On our best days, we try to say,
Yeah.
maybe they're working with the university side of the house, which because their regulatory regime is a little more permissive, is who can we partner with there to kind of bring them back
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
fold. But if you can't get there with all those, tactics, it is, you have to escalate. And fortunately, I will say we have, I do feel we have a tremendous amount of support from our executive leadership.
Mm-hmm.
They're reasonable. They don't default, to us. They really want to hear things out. But the security culture here is strong, I'll say.
Well, what you said is really interesting, and I think that's a good lesson for people to take away. Get creative, right? Let's get creative. You know, number one is benefit of the doubt. So you're having a bad day, I can come back, right? So patience to a point, creativity for other ways to approach the issue, and then ultimately escalation because the risk may be larger than we're willing to accept. So it has to be resolved. We have to get to resolution here, and then we go from there. And
Well, and I like what you said about the risk because it's not about the actions of the individual. If we do escalate, we try to stay narrowly focused on data we have about the risk
right,
so
right,
that it doesn't, try to just depersonalize
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So,
yep, absolutely. All right, Ashley, let me just ask you one more question, and I'm gonna let you go. We're at about time. And this is, well, number one, I want to say that I think you need a different title because I think it would, your job is not just business information, it's sort of customized high risk cybersecurity solutions, which sounds like the tagline for your company when you hang out your own shingle. Um, but no, it's a little more nuanced, I think, than the title. It's a very
Mm.
interesting role. So that's just my comment. Put that in the suggestion box. Um, so the way I usually frame up the last question is for someone who is doing your role at another health system of comparable size, so pretty much you somewhere else with maybe less experience or hasn't had some of the experiences you have or some of the insights, what's your best piece of advice for that person?
Oh my gosh, find a friend, find two friends.
can you be can you describe what you mean a little bit by that?
Cybersecurity is a fascinating and sometimes lonely job.
Hmm.
Um, it's really challenging. I think it's tough not to get, sometimes you look at the threat landscape and,
Oh yeah.
it can crash over you like a wave. Um, to be your best self, in my opinion, as be so, and show up with that, um, ready to listen, ready to translate as best as possible, ready to try to give the benefit of the doubt. You can't come into it stressed.
Mm.
You gotta really try to come into it with an open mindset. Which in my opinion means you need a buddy, you need an outlet. So if you can find another BSO, either
Ah.
through HISAC, there is a BSO subcommittee there,
Mm-hmm.
or um, if you can find somebody else, even or another CISO, somebody that you can kind of just have a quarterly debrief with and kind of,
Mm-hmm.
man, I had this issue. How did you handle it? Or I'm struggling with this, or how do I explain this to my board?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. Find a buddy to where
Mm.
in a low to no risk Vegas rules kind of way, you can just compare notes and be vulnerable and learn from each other. Um, that's the best
That's
advice
great.
I can give.
No, that's great advice. That's great advice. This has been one of the more enjoyable chats I've had, and a lot of
Thank
fun.
you. Thank
Fascinating
you.
role, really interesting. And yeah, maybe well, you said HISAC already has a group for this, so maybe growing this sort of customized, tailored cybersecurity solutions for higher risk entities. I love it. So, Ashley, great to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time. I hope I can catch up with you again down the road. So,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much. All
All
right.
right.
I
You
appreciate it.
you have a wonderful day.
You too.